Oh, well, thank you all for coming tonight. So I'm going to just jump right into the talk. So I have been doing this work for about 14 years now. And the way that I got started doing this is that I attended UCLA. And while I was at UCLA, I was involved with excavating the Chinese sites here in Ventura. So when I graduated, I thought, oh gosh, I want to continue with this work. It's really fascinating, and I just love to continue doing Chinese American history. And out of the blue, Don Morris from the National Park Service called me up and said, Linda, I have found archaeological sites, Chinese archaeological sites on Santa Rosa Island. Now, Don Morris is the former archaeologist for the Park Service, and we're very fortunate to have Don here with us today. Thank you, Don, for coming. So Don said, Linda, are you in? Will you do this for me? And I said, yes, I will. So I've been investigating Chinese on the Channel Islands for about 14 years now. So let's get started. Okay, so the Chinese came from southern China, from the Guangdong province, right here. Now, there has been some controversy about the Chinese. Some scholars have said that the Chinese were basically out-of-work railroad workers that came into the fisheries after the railroads were built, but I don't agree. They definitely knew what they were doing. The Chinese fishermen who came to California knew exactly what they were doing. They came with the skills to fish certain species. They knew what needed to be hung to be dried. They knew what needed to be laid on flat surfaces to be dried. They came with the skill of the gear, and they came with the knowledge to build the ships. So they definitely knew what they were doing when they got here. Okay, so the first village that was established in California, actually there was a camp, a very small abalone camp in Monterey in the early 1850s, and then you have an actual village in Carmel right around 1851. So the different communities or camps or villages that you have along the coast were Monterey. These are the large ones, Monterey, which specialized in the squid fishery. You have the Bay Area, which specialized in the shrimp fishery, and then down in San Diego, were involved with abalone. Now, there were camps or villages from the border of Oregon all along the California coast, down into Baja, and then along the Delta in Sacramento, the Sacramento Delta. And of course, on the Channel Islands, we are looking at abalone. And the fishermen that worked in the fisheries along the California coast were the first that were involved in the commercial fishing industry. When the Chinese first came here, they hunted for several different species. They pretty much would take whatever they could in an organized fashion. I see that they were fishing along with the abalone. They were taking what are called redfish. They also fished for shark, and they also dealt with shellfish. But pretty much on the Channel Islands, we are dealing with abalone. So by the time the Chinese arrived here, the abalone population had exploded because the otter, here's our otter right here, the otter had been hunted to near extinction, and the abalone is part of the otter's diet. So the population of abalone just exploded. So you can just imagine when the Chinese get here, they look at the shoreline and they go, oh my gosh, look at all this abalone. They didn't need to go to the gold fields. They had their gold right here in California. So the way that you harvest, if you're a fisherman, the way that you harvest the abalone is that you pry it from the rocks, as you can see here, abalone here. Okay, so you pry it from the rocks at low tide with a pry bar, and this was done by walking along the shoreline or doing it in a sampan. Here's my little sampan model. Isn't that cute? SK, you recognize that? Little sampan model right there, okay? The meat was boiled in a cauldron over a hearth. Here's a hearth. This hearth is from San Nicolas Island. And then it was laid in the sun to dry. And the majority of the meat was shipped to San Francisco and then exported to China, where it was a delicacy. Some of the meat was sent out to the Chinatowns here in California, to work camps, and also to Hawaii. And beginning around the 1870s, the shell became very important. So the shell was manufactured into buttons, hair combs, and curios. And they were also sent to China, and they were used for lacquer work. And in some cases, what happened is that the Chinese went back to some of the abalone middens and retrieved some of those shells so that they could be shipped over to, let's see, they're shipped to San Francisco for certain items, and off to Germany and France to be manufactured. Okay, the Chinese fishing activities on the Channel Islands, it began probably in the 1850s. I don't have absolute evidence for the 1850s. The very earliest that I have them out on the islands is 1861. So we're looking at about 1861 till about 1913. And almost every island had a location named after the Chinese. San Nicolas Island had Chinese Harbor. San Clemente had China Point. Santa Catalina has China Point. Santa Cruz has Chinese Harbor, and Santa Rosa has China Camp. So what it looks like, and this is kind of new, I'm just working this out, is that it looks like on the islands that were owned, the Chinese went out there and they had leases. So they had leases on Santa Cruz Island, Santa Rosa Island, and on Santa Catalina Island. But they squatted on the other islands that were owned by the government, which was Santa Barbara Island, San Miguel Island, San Clemente, and San Nicolas. And during the time that they were out there, there was also ranching operations that were going on. Okay, the way that I like to think about how the Chinese got out to the islands is there's two groups of crews, of fishermen that went out there. There's the ones with boats and the ones without boats. So the crews with the boats, okay, were basically men that worked for Chinese merchants in Santa Barbara's Chinese community. The merchants provided the men with fishing gear, tents, and food supplies. The crews were transported on their vessels on junks. There's a picture of, there's a picture of on board a junk. This was actually a junk up in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then there are the fishermen that didn't have ships. So they were transported to the islands on Euro-American vessels, like the one you see here. This here is the Santa Rosa Island, this vessel. So what happened in this case is that the Chinese fishermen were taken out to the islands and dropped off to stay on the islands for a long time to harvest abalone. So what I'm not really sure of is I'm not sure if the men that went out on these vessels right here, if they worked for merchants that didn't have boats or if they were independent fishermen. That's still yet to be seen. This work is ongoing. Okay? All right, so let's talk about the islands individually. So on Santa Barbara Island in 1897, a Chinese lobster fisherman lived on the island in a small hut above the landing cove, which is right here. Okay? And on Anacapa Island in 1884, Chinese fishermen occupied a shack on West Anacapa Island. In 1896, Chinese fishermen described in the newspaper as described in the newspaper as living in tents. They talked about how they were living in tents with all these abalone shells all around them. And in 1900, Chinese fishermen working on Anacapa were fined for taking abalone out of season. Okay, now we're going to talk about Santa Rosa Island. So a lot of what I'm going to tell you about tonight comes from the United States Commission of Fish and Fisheries. So this is what they said about Santa Rosa Island. In 1881 and 1882, there was a colony. They call it a colony, okay, of Chinese fishermen. I'm not sure what a colony is, but that's what they call it. In 1893, there were 3 camps on the island. In 1896, there was 1 camp, so we're starting to see a bit of a decline. And in 1904, there were 2 fishermen on the island. And Don Morris, our famous archaeologist, he located Chinese fishing camps on the island between Sandy Point and Johnson's Lee, here on this side of the island. Okay. Okay, so some of the understanding of what we have about Chinese fishermen on Santa Rosa Island begins with the investigation of the Golden Horn. Okay, so the Golden Horn, this four-masted bark, was traveling from Newcastle, New South Wales, Australia, to San Pedro with a cargo of coal for the Southern Pacific Railroad. And on a foggy night on September 12, 1892, the Golden Horn wrecked on rocks offshore along the southwest coast of Santa Rosa Island near Sandy Point. The crew, nobody was hurt on this. The crew got off and they were fine. But there were crews that were sent out to the island to salvage the ship. But newspaper accounts also talk about that on October 19, 1892, Chinese fishermen came out to the island. So this shows you, this is the wreck site here on Santa Rosa Island. And this is some of the wood from the site. This is Don. This is my friend Bob Schwimmer sitting in the front row right here. And somebody took the coal out of the water and stacked it up along this little terrace here, okay? And whoever it was, they left some abalone shells behind. Okay? Now, the other thing that happened is that somebody took the hatch cover 2 hatch covers from the Golden Horn and carried it up this stream bank here, okay, and placed it in the wall right here. This is what it looked like. Okay, this is from 1995. Several of us went out there and excavated this site. Okay, so that's what it looks like. And this is what it looks like close up. Okay, and then it was mapped and removed and excavated. And we found clear glass, and we found sheep bones. Now, another interesting thing about these sheep bones is that the year previous, in 1891, some Chinese fishermen on Santa Cruz Island were arrested for poaching sheep. So we also find sheep bones on San Miguel Island. So we'll leave that one up to your imagination on that one. Okay? Okay, also during this expedition, we went to, ooh, am I okay? Okay, okay. You know what? It might be my jewelry. Okay, okay, all right. Thank you. Okay, okay. So we also went over to a site which is near Johnson's Lee. So this is what it looked like. Oops, I'm sorry. This is what it looked like. It was up on a bluff. Ooh, I'm doing the wrong thing. Okay, it was up on a bluff, okay, with some walls around it like this. And the things that we found here were nails and brown wares, okay, brown ceramics, metals, and this is the top of an opium lamp right here. And this opium lamp was embedded in an abalone shell. So this was really great. Don sat down and he took out his Leatherman and he dug out this top of the opium. We didn't know it was the top of an opium lamp at the time. We thought that it was a broken bottle. But he dug it out and we all sat around. And then we took it to an archaeologist and that specializes in Chinese artifacts, and she gave it the diagnosis that it was the top of an opium lamp. Okay. Okay, here we go. Okay, San Nicolas Island is our next island that we're going to look at. And Chinese abalone fishermen worked on San Nicolas Island as early as the 1870s at a location named Chinese Harbor. It was probably located at or near Corral Harbor, right here. Okay. And Steve Schwartz, who was a United States Navy archaeologist, located several Chinese abalone camps on San Nicolas Island. And it's kind of hard to see these, but you see these numbers around the shoreline here? These are the camps that he found. Okay? Okay. In 1900, 3 Chinese fishermen were dropped off on the island by the schooner Santa Rosa, which is the vessel that we saw earlier. And after living on the island for a few months, the fishermen returned to their camp at Corral Harbor and found that they had been robbed by other fishermen who were fishing on the island at the time. And 1,500 pounds of abalone meat was stolen along with their rice. So for the next 3 months, the men ate only abalone. They were they were suffering. There were a lot of malnutrition going on the island. And one of their men died on the island. Meanwhile, back in Santa Barbara, their employer, a man named Jim, did not know that his men were suffering, and he needed to get them off the island, but unfortunately the Santa Rosa had wrecked. So he was having a really hard time finding a vessel. So he ultimately hired the gasoline schooner, the Dawn, to rescue the crew. And they found the men in this building here, in this adobe building, and they were barely alive. In the newspaper account, it says they were too weak to walk and almost too exhausted to speak. And the 2 remaining fishermen returned to Santa Barbara, and they had plans to remove the body of their fallen countrymen from San Nicolas Island. Okay, now we're going to look at Santa Cruz Island. You know what's interesting? It's such a big island, and we don't really know a lot about what was happening on Santa Cruz Island. So it's been suggested that there were camps at Forney's Cove, Prisoners. There's Scorpion and Chinese Harbor here. And the United States Fish Commission said that in 1881 and 1882, once again, there was a colony of Chinese fishermen out on the island. But by the end of 1893, there were 3 camps of fishermen on the island. And in 1896, there was 1 camp. So once again, you're seeing a decline of the fishermen. In 1904, there were 5 Chinese fishermen on the island. And in 1908, a man named Poi, who is a merchant, we're going to see him pretty soon, he renewed his lease. It looks like they were renewing their lease every year. And there was a bit of an abalone trade-off, so that's how they were doing it. They were giving them, it was something like, we'll give you 100 pounds of abalone for every 1,000 pounds that we harvest. So that was the arrangement for Poi. Okay, now we're going to look at San Miguel Island. And we're very lucky to have the work of Todd Brady, who is an archaeologist at the University of Oregon. He's allowing me to show you some of his work, and this is all pretty new work here. So what he did is that he did a very detailed survey of San Miguel Island, and he walked all around, and he found 17 what he thinks are Chinese abalone sites around the island. Now these are characterized by, they're like shells. They're midden shells, like black abalone. So they're difficult to identify. And what Todd says, that he said they looked like they were temporary. Whoops. Uh-oh. Oh, that's not, there we go. Okay. He said that they looked like they were temporary. So hang on, let me back this up. I'm sorry. Okay. He said it looked like the base camp that they were using on San Miguel Island was right here at Adams Cove. Okay, so these are some of the things that he found out there. He found hearths. He found about a circular hearth. Okay, this is another hearth that is more rectangular, and this is excavated. In the bottom of this hearth, he found metal. Okay, he found shell casings, nails, more ceramics. Now, these ceramics are brownware, so what I did is I brought you some samples of these. These are important. You get these from China. Their food came in these. So something like this, you would get like pickled vegetables, okay? This is a wine jar. These all come from China. So when you find these in an archaeological site, you say, yes, this is a Chinese site. So these are diagnostic for a Chinese site. Here's a smaller one of the brownwares. And this is a soy sauce jar. And I bought these on eBay. Good old eBay. Okay. And one of the last things that he found, and this is really interesting, is he found sawn sea lion teeth. Now, he's not exactly sure what these were. He's not exactly sure that these are even Chinese, because right around the 1900s, you have both Japanese fishermen and you have Euro-American fishermen who are out there harvesting abalone. So these are, right now, they're with an archaeologist, so we'll get the diagnosis on those, to get some diagnostics and find out exactly what those are. Okay. So remember I was telling you how a lot of the work, a lot of the literature that I read to find out about the fishermen comes from the U.S. Commission of Fish and Fisheries. So I wanted to show you a bit of an example here of the books. So these come out yearly pretty much, but they don't always talk about the Pacific fisheries. They talk about the fisheries all over the country. So I think this is pretty interesting. This is for 1888. It shows you the fishery products that are being shipped through the Pacific Coast Steamship Company during these months between February and December. So it shows you both the abalone shell. There's even some live seals on there, which I think is really neat. So that gives you an idea of what that looks like. And then you can see the yields here for 1879. So let me break that down for you, give you a per price or per pound price on that. So in 1879, the meat was sold for 5 cents per pound and the shells sold for 2.5 cents a pound. And in 1895, the meat was selling for 4.5 cents, and the shell was selling for 1 cent. So you have a decline. You're seeing that the market is changing on abalone. Okay, now we're going to talk about Chinese junks. Now, I could talk to you for a half an hour about Chinese junks, okay? But this is just going to be a really brief little talk about Chinese junks. So here we go. Okay, in 1872, a Chinese man-o-war, is a derogatory term, was built in the shipyard on Canyon Perdido Street. Okay, a Chinese junk was rolled to the sea from the shipyard in Santa Barbara in 1876. So can you imagine this? Probably what they did is, apparently the shipyard was on Canyon Perdido Street, so they rolled this ship out of Canyon Perdido Street and down State Street right to the sea. Could you imagine? That's how I envision it. Okay. Okay, in 1879, the Unghua, sailed by Captain Hop Lee, arrived at Santa Cruz Island to gather shells. In 1884, a Chinese junk wrecks off of San Nicolas Island. The ship was 35 tons register. Now, in the newspaper account, they say that this ship came from San Diego. There appears to be some kind of connection between the fishermen in San Diego and the fishermen in Santa Barbara. Haven't quite figured it out yet. It appears to be two different clans that are fishing, but we'll see with more research. Okay, in 1885, several articles in Santa Barbara's Daily Independent described Chinese junks and their activities, and their owner, Sing Chung. It was really interesting. In 1885, a reporter from this newspaper, from the Daily Independent, actually went down to the harbor and went on a junk and describes everything about it. Talks about the color of it, the smell of it, what they're cooking, what they're wearing. It was really an amazing article. Okay, in 1890, a junk belonging to Sing Chung drifts from anchor in Santa Barbara and floats here to Ventura. Can you imagine? And then in 1903, a 28-foot ship belonging to Chinese men was towed by the Edith when it broke away and went adrift. So this is the last account that I have for the junks in 1903. I don't know what happened to the junks, okay? And you may have noticed these junks, if you look at the background, this junk is from San Diego. I don't have any pictures of a junks in Santa Barbara. So if any of you do have any pictures of junks at home, come and see me. Go into your trunks and see if you can find them. Okay, let's look at some of the fishermen. So when I first started this work, I kept running into this business, the Sing Chung and Company, on Canyon Perdido Street, and they had a business in the Elizalde Adobe right here, okay? And what's interesting is that the name of the company was Sing Chung, okay, and the name of the man who ran the company was referred to as Sing Chung. So let me tell you a little bit about him. What I do know about him is that he came to the United States in 1869, and according to the 1880 census, he was 35 years old and unmarried. The tax rolls for 1881 shows that his store inventory was $1,000, and he had 200 cords of wood. Wonder what he's doing with that wood. The wood could have been used, of course, for processing abalone. And also in 1885, he set up a fish curing building right on the beach in Santa Barbara. But due to the horrible smell, the local residents just said, you got to get that out of there. You got to take that away. And he had, in 1885, he had 6 junks that he owned. So he was a merchant that owned junks. And it appears that he sold the interest to his business in 1896. Okay? So let me tell you, it has always been my dream to find a picture of the Chinese fishermen, and there's all kinds of problems with finding Chinese settlers. One of the problems is names. The names are always something that you have to be able to follow. So according to Chinese tradition, when you're born, you have a name. You have another name when you go to school. You have another name when you get married. And when you come to America, you're usually referred to as Ah Poi, Ah Jim, or you're referred to by your business name. Okay? So I thought, I can do this. I can go to the National Archives and I can get files and I can get pictures. Now, let me just back up a little bit and explain to you how this is done. The Chinese were excluded in 1882, so their comings and their goings were highly documented. So there are these types of records that are at the National Archives. So anytime a Chinese settler went to China and returned, a file was opened and their picture is on it. Okay? So I thought to myself, this is no problem. I'll go to Laguna Niguel. I'll ask them for an immigration file for Sing Chung. I'll get his picture. I'll get all kinds of testimony, because in these, unfortunately, because the Chinese were excluded, they were questioned. So in these files, there's a whole list, I can just show you, of question and answer. So there's a lot of information in these files. So I thought, this is great, I'm going to do this. Okay, so I go to the National Archives, can't find anything on Sing Chung. Okay, so I thought, okay, I can do this. So I know that the common clan name in Santa Barbara is Yi and Jin. So I start reading all the Yi and Jin files that I can find, okay? Nothing, I can't find anything. I got real close one time in that Sing Chung testified for someone, and I'm there in the National Archives, and I thought, okay, this is it. I'm going to turn the page, and his real name is going to be there, because he had to sign him, okay? I turned the page, and it said Sing Chung. So I thought, okay, now what am I going to do? So what I decided to do is I decided to get all of the business files for the Chinese businesses in Santa Barbara. So I found this right here, where the police department went into the Chinese community in 1901 and documented all the Chinese businesses. So here's the names of the businesses, and here's their partners. So through a series of elimination, I found him. There he is. Okay. So this is his file from 1898, and he's from the Soon clan. So he wasn't a Yi and he wasn't a Jin. He was from the Soon clan. So this opened up all kinds of new possibilities for me. So I went to the National Archives and I said, give me all the Soon files that you have. So I was very lucky to find some more. Okay. So these are some of the other men that I was able to find. So Soon Joe right here. Sorry about these pictures. These are photocopies, and then I had to enhance them a bit in Photoshop. But Sun Zhou, he lived in Santa Barbara. He had arrived in Santa Barbara in 1878. He was a manager of a Sun Lung Company in 1901. And his store was located at 36 Cannon Perdido Street. And in his testimony, he said that his store had merchandise, and they also had boats, trays, fishing tackle, and he said that the equipment that they had was for catching abalone. Okay, and then this is Sun Poi. Now, Sun Poi appears to be the man that did all the negotiations with the owners of the islands. He was the one that signed the contracts. And Sun Poi came to the United States in 1870. He was a shrimp fisherman in San Francisco first, which I think is really interesting, is that first he went and he fished for shrimp, and then he came here and he harvested abalone. And and he harvested abalone beginning in 1881. And then Tai Kin, right here, he was a foreman. He was the one that was the foreman for the Cruz out on the islands. So there's 4. I have 4 fishermen now. I will continue my quest to find more fishermen. Okay. So what happened with the Chinese in the fisheries is that there was a concerted effort to drive them out of the fisheries. And they were attacked on several fronts, both from the federal government as well as the state and counties. So beginning in the 1870s, the Chinese in California were accused of depleting the fisheries. And they were accused of depleting the fisheries up in the Bay Area with the shrimp fishing, and they were also accused of depleting the fisheries with their fine mesh nets. I read all of these accounts about all of those Chinese fishermen. Their nets are fine mesh. They're fishing and they're getting all the small fish, so they're depleting the fisheries. And then in 1893, the federal government reclassified Chinese fishermen as laborers, so they became an excluded class. When the Chinese were excluded, it was basically the laborers that they were after, because of the whole labor movement was popular in the beginning in the 1870s. So merchants were allowed to come into America and travel back and forth. So the fishermen were pretty much able to stay and come into the country. But because there was this effort to exclude the Chinese from the fisheries, in 1893 the fishermen were classified as laborers, therefore they were no longer allowed to come to America. In the late 1890s, the California state legislature prohibited shrimp fishing between the months of May and October, and this is prime shrimp fishing months. But this was fought, the Chinese fought this, and the law was repealed. Fishermen in San Diego, once again, they were accused of depleting the abalone. They were also accused of destroying the fish populations with their fine nets. In 1905, another attempt to end Chinese fishing industry, the legislature enacted a law that prohibited the exportation of dried shrimp and shells from the state. In 1900, county ordinances were passed that prohibited intertidal collection of abalone. So in 1900, this is interesting, in 1900, the Chinese fishermen could no longer collect abalone in the intertidal zone. This is the same time that the Japanese are coming into America. So the Japanese come in and they start to dive for abalone. The Chinese didn't dive, the Japanese dove for abalone. There was also size restrictions that were placed on abalone, as well as closed seasons. Okay, and between 1913 and 1943, the commercial harvest of abalone was prohibited. So what we've learned here is that the Chinese fishermen who worked on the Channel Islands, they worked there between the 1860s and 1913. Abalone was the focus of the Chinese fishing industry on the Channel Islands. Chinese fishing vessels, Chinese junks, plied the waters between 1870 and 1900, and images of junks are needed. Once again, tell your friends, need those pictures of junks. There's archaeological evidence of Chinese occupation on San Nicolas Island, Santa Rosa Island, San Miguel Island, and also San Clemente Island. Further historical research and archaeological investigation is required to learn more about Chinese fishermen who worked on the Channel Islands. And oral histories are needed to be conducted with descendants of Chinese fishermen who worked on the Channel Islands. So I need to find some of the Sun clan so that I can conduct oral histories with them and get their side of the story. And here are my acknowledgments. Don Morris right here up on top. If it weren't for Don, I wouldn't be standing in front of you tonight. So that's it. Thank you very much. Is there any questions? Is there any questions? Yes, sir.
So the Chinese then were after black abalone?
Mm-hmm. Black abalone.
Is that pretty much the only ones they could?
I think, Don, did we find evidence of red abalone, or is it mostly all black?
everything I've seen is black abalone. There may be a red abalone hidden on San Miguel on the northwest coast. I'd be really interested to see what Todd might have to say about that.
Yeah.
If you know anything about it.
Yeah, right. It's all being analyzed right now. But yeah, we could talk about that, definitely. Any other questions? Yes.
I was interested about the harvesting of the end product of the abalone once it's all dry.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that, they brought the abalone to like Santa Barbara and it was consumed locally. I had no idea that.
Oh, most of it was exported. Some of it was consumed locally. It's interesting. Roberta Greenwood, who was the one who excavated the Chinese community in Los Angeles, she found some evidence of abalone. She had it analyzed, and it came from the Channel Islands. So there was some that stayed here locally, some that went to work camps. There apparently a big trade of it going off to Hawaii, but most of it went off to China. Any other questions?
Did they fish for abalone, or what did they fish for in China that they would have had the experience to know?
There was abalone in China. From what I understand is that it was starting to be depleted. So when the Chinese came here and saw that this delicacy that they have in China, was readily available. They also fish for shrimp, I believe. SK? Yeah, shrimp. What else? What else do we have in China?
Well, they dried shrimps and they use the dried shrimps for making soup.
In China.
Small shrimps. And abalone is a delicacy, and shells are used.
Okay, John?
Linda, what did you find out, the Chinese junks or the ships, were there shipyards that specialized in the junks?
Mhm.
Where were the ships built?
Okay, they were built in Santa Barbara. They were built in San Diego. They were built in the Bay Area also. That's what we've identified, okay? I have a list of about, 35 junks that several of them up in the Bay Area. Most of the junks that I have are up in the Bay Area. I have a list of about 12 from San Diego, and I've identified about 3 or 4 from here. But we know that in 1885, Chung had 6 of them in Santa Barbara.
Do you think that the shipwrights who built them actually came from China to here to build?
I think so. One of the difference between the junks that were built in China and the junks that are built here is that they were built from redwood here in California.
The size, the average size?
The average size, about 53 feet. Yes?
Do you know anything about the diet of these Chinese fishermen in the little camps? I worry about them just eating abalone and
I know.
fish.
I do too. Well, it's interesting. Anytime that I see what they're eating, like the junk that wrecked off San Nicolas, they talked about how they had to pull off this giant bag of rice. We know that they stole rice, from the camp off of San Nicolas Island. So they had this imported. All this was imported. So when you're seeing these out on the islands, this was their food. This is like a food container, okay? So you'd have like vegetables, and you'd have your wine and your soy sauce. So yeah, they had other food.
Are these rival camps that would steal from each other? Is that the
Isn't that interesting? I hope not. I hope there wasn't warring between the Chinese camps out there. I haven't seen any evidence of that. But we do see, I have evidence of twice where the Chinese were robbed. They were robbed there in 1900. Well, okay. The one on San Nicolas Island, I'm not sure, okay? There was another robbery on Santa Cruz Island about 5 months after the one that I talked about in 1900, and it turns out that the men were smugglers.
They were who?
Smugglers. Yeah, they were smugglers. And they went to jail.
They weren't Chinese then?
No. The men that were arrested that stole the abalone on Santa Cruz, they were pretty bold. They went to Santa Cruz, they stole the abalone, they took it to Gaviota and shipped it out of Gaviota, and then they were caught. And they went to San Quentin for 4 years. They were sentenced for 4 years, but they got out after 3 years for good behavior. Yeah. Any more questions? Yes.
Now, on the islands, there are edible foods.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any evidence that the fishermen would wander around the islands and try to collect some of this food stuff?
Well, we know that they were wandering around the islands harvesting abalone. Okay, we know that they were doing that. But as far as collecting the food, what I would like to see is I would like to see Todd Bragy's work to see if he finds any evidence of that, because that hasn't really been, figured out yet what they were doing. So stay tuned. We'll get the analysis on that. Yes.
I'm interested about how the Chinese king, the fisherman got here in the first place. You touched on that briefly at the beginning. You said you thought they were not Chinese who had been brought in for
Right.
the railroad.
Right.
How do you think they did come in?
Oh, they came on steamships. Now what's interesting.
Restricted, were there quotas about?
Yes. So the first Exclusion Act is 1882, okay, and our first Chinese fishermen that we've identified are coming in about 1850. So, yeah, there was about 30 years that they were able to come in without restriction. Yeah.
Okay, now, most of the Chinese were taking the abalone just by rock picking?
Yeah,
Have
that's my understanding, prying it from the rocks.
have you run into anything, talking about more using looking glasses and, a box with glass at the bottom you can look in from the surface and long
Now,
poles?
so you're thinking for deeper abalone? That's what you're thinking. Now, my understanding is the Chinese took pretty much from the intertidal zone. Now, the Japanese might have used that kind of looking glass. That's possible. I've heard of that, but not associated with the Chinese.
Okay.
Yeah.
And commercial abalone was prohibited from 1913 to 1943?
Mm-hmm.
So nobody could take it at all commercially?
That's my understanding. Yeah, that's from the Fish and Game website. That's what they said. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, sir.
Oh, well, in the 50s and 60s, I lived in Laguna Beach, and my friends and I dove for abalone for food. But blacks were not considered to be really very good. I mean, we went for greens and what we used to call pinks. I don't know.
You mean taste-wise?
Well,
They didn't
yeah,
taste very
They
good?
were regarded as,
Junk.
trash.
Yeah.
They're tough. They're tough.
Are they? Yeah.
Yes.
You know what? The one thing that I'm not sure of, because I know I've eaten abalone, and I know the first thing you do is you pound it. Okay. I haven't found evidence that they pounded it. What I hear is that they harvested, they scooped it out of the shell, they put it in the cauldron, and they laid it out to dry. So, SK, have you ever had dried abalone?
Yes.
What's it like?
Well, you have to soak it for a long time and mix soup with it.
Okay.
Did
It's like chewing gum.
I understood well that you say that the fishermen on San Nicolas almost died from starvation?
They almost died of starvation.
Doesn't it make the story of the lone woman of San Nicolas who lived there 15 years on her own?
I know. I'm so glad you mentioned that because I think about that myself. How did she live out there for 18 years by herself? And she was able to survive, and one died. I know. Okay, so I don't know if this is true, but this is what I think about, okay, is that she was native to the island, so maybe she knew where there were roots, there was apparently some kind of carrot or something that you could eat. And the other thing that could be possible is that these were ranching, the ranching operations. So I know that the sheep out there were doing heavy grazing, so that might have, changed the vegetation out there. That's what I, off the top of my head. Don Morris.
Get back to the ships. We don't have any surviving examples of the Chinese junks that were built here, as far as you know. Any studies been done on it?
Okay, we have one that wrecked, it burned at, let's see, Point San Pedro, okay? That's the one that was recreated by John Muir about 5 years ago. He excavated it, and he was able to identify, the structure. So that's the only surviving example that I know of. Yeah. Any more questions? Anyone? Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you for coming out.